Anyway, so this is my friend George. I met him in college, and now he's actually becoming a pastor um, where he's living at right now. And I'm gonna have him give an update on his life real quick, just so you can know who he is. But what we're here for is we're here to learn a little bit of church history. So you're like, and we're not talking about Roman Catholic or anything like that old. It's actually modern church history. And you know, I was curious. Well, I've always been curious about this, but when you drive around, you see all these one-name churches. You're like, the Stone, River Church, Cross something. Every church is, even our church is called Crossroads, but we Baptist. We know where we came from, and it's like, I was curious, where did all these churches come up one day? Because 20 years ago, everybody had, what kind of church they were, Methodist or Lutheran or something, Baptist. And then now all of a sudden, there's just these random churches, and then they say they're not part of anything. So in my mind, I'm like, is there like one secret mega non-denominational denomination, like setting all these non-denominational churches up, like some mega, like secret corporation, or is it just kind of simple? People just don't have their names all the way. So I was just like, if anyone could get to the bottom of this case, it's my good buddy George. I know he will definitely figure it out. So introduce yourself and then kind of tell us what you're going to present today, and we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, so thank you, Kirk. As he said, my name is George. Uh, I've known Kirk now for oh goodness, what 2018 I think was when we
Yeah.
first met. About 8 years ago now. It's almost been a decade that we've known each other. We were roommates for a brief period during one summer,
That was a lot of fun.
summer of 2019. It was a lot of fun. It was between our years of college, right before the wonderful college year that was the 2019 to 2020 year, when
Yeah,
everything
great
decided
times.
that it was going to be shut down. So um, we met at Golden State. I'm sure you remember well, Kirk.
Yes. Legendary times.
Yeah. I was a bit what do you want to call it? Infamous on campus for just my eccentricities and quirks.
You're
Um,
just a legendary character, legendary figure, things like that.
yeah. There were definitely some people more legendary than I, though. I will say that, but for very different reasons. So, I mean, let's just get into this. Just just in out of curiosity, when do you think non-denominationalism as a concept really started and tried to take hold?
Um, Probably whenever, I don't know, maybe like 2000, like five, maybe before I was started thinking.
No, way before that.
Okay, wow.
The very first movement for non-denominationalism actually goes all the way back to the 1800s,
Oh
which
my
most
goodness.
people wouldn't think of. But it started with Alexander Campbell and Barton W. Stone. It's called the
Wow.
Stone-Campbell movement. Now, if you're familiar with watching YouTube channels like Ready to Harvest, um, really cool guy. My sisters actually went to college with him at a different college, but he does a lot of denominational studies. You'll hear him refer to Stone-Campbellite as a term in denominationalism pretty frequently, and it stems from that movement. So really, the thing that distinguishes a lot of Christian beliefs from each other, one from another, is one specific piece of how we think, um, and that being what hermeneutic we use to study Scripture.
And
So
for the people, you know, not for me.
yeah, yeah.
I totally remember photographic memory. What was hermeneutics again?
Hermeneutics is basically your study system for the Bible. What you
Okay.
use as your standards for how you study the Bible. You have different ones out there. One such example would be literal, grammatical, historical. You take those three different contexts and you view everything through the lens of those. So, literal hermeneutic would be let's look at this literally. What does it mean literally first, right? Um, Historical hermeneutic would be, uh, what did it mean in this specific point in history, right? Grammatical hermeneutic, what does this mean in the sentence, right? What does the sentence structure tell us? Is this something that's a turn of phrase, or is this something that's, just supposed to be taken literally, right?
And
So
so, what? So you're saying that the different churches believe have different hermeneutics, and that's what
what
differentiated them?
one of many different things. So that's where it all starts with this movement. Actually, is the way that that Campbell viewed hermeneutics. So Campbell had a belief in hermeneutics that was linked to a lot of more, I'm going to say, enlightenment based thinking, right? The thinking of like Francis Bacon. The
Mhm.
I believe it was the knowledge
1700s.
is, yeah, knowledge is power guy. I believe is what his thing was. And Francis Bacon was very much so into, he had this method, Baconian induction, right? So the also known as inductive reasoning, right? So that's you
Sherlock
remove,
Holmes.
yeah, exactly, you remove all other possible outcomes, and whatever outcome is left, that's the outcome, that must be the truth, right?
Hmm.
You think Sherlock Holmes, you think, okay, even though it's crazy that this person killed this person by setting up this machine to do this, and then they did this at this time and did this at this time. Well, nothing else is possible, so therefore that must be the only explanation. So
Mm.
when you remove, and so basically that was his primary mode of thought, right? And alongside this, his hermeneutic was historical context, speaker context, hearer context, context of the world itself, and figurative language. So basically, okay, historical context, what was going on at the time, original hearer's context, what would the original hearer think, context of the word itself, within the sentence, that grammatical context, figurative language. Okay, is this something that's a figure of speech? So this this really went along with that. But he believed some different things about salvation, which kind of alienated him from a lot of others. So the two primary modes of thoughts of salvation at the time in the 1800s, right? You have the Arminian
Works of
camp
faith.
and the Calvinist camp,
Oh, Armenian and Calvinists. Yes,
right?
that was
So
what I was saying.
So he actually was solidly outside of both of those camps because he believed that one had to bring themselves to what was called the point of understanding,
Hmm.
where basically they had to, they had to humble themselves first before God would reveal himself.
Yeah, just for anybody out there, and I know this, you could write like 10,000 page book on each one of those terms you just said. Can you give me like the 10-second version of like Arminianism?
Goodness, yeah. I
And
I use
give
all
me give
these,
me the butchery, just so like we kind of get
yeah,
a reference. And then the ten
yeah.
second version of Calvinism.
So
So if you didn't know, if you're gonna listen to this later, there's a whole people go to Bible college or theology school for both of these or study these ideas for many years. But this will just help give you a frame of reference, so that way you kind of get the picture of where these groups, Arminianism and Calvinism, are coming from. Because it's really in depth topics, and this
yeah,
guy was outside of both.
yes. So Calvinism really in general is the belief of predestination, right? Specifically, people would argue double predestination makes one a Calvinist, that God creates some to be saved and some to be destroyed, and vessels for the wrath of God, right? That's the belief of Calvinism. Irresistible grace being a big point of that, which is that God will present his grace to you, and you have to, not you have to choose, but you have to follow it. You can't
Basically,
resist.
they don't believe in free will, right?
They don't believe in libertarian free will, but they still believe in free will and other things aside from salvation. But in a general sense, yes. They believe that God is the one who's sovereign over who lives and who dies, effectively.
And then Arminianism, how does that one differ?
Yeah, so Arminianism, and this is going to shock some people. Arminianism, the biggest difference is honestly not, some people will believe that they have everything different. They both believe in what's called total depravity of man, which is an important concept when we're getting into this. But the biggest differences are Calvinists believe that once somebody is saved, not only can they not lose their salvation, but they cannot turn away from what God would have them to do effectively. Like they can't um, they can't apostatize at all. If they apostatize, then that means that they are 100%, they were never saved to begin with, right?
Mhm.
Arminians believe that one can reject God's gift after it has been granted to them. Um, and they also believe, instead of believing in that irresistible grace, they believe in something called prevenient grace, and that God provides basically a means for man who, in their belief, is still totally depraved and can't do anything good of themselves. They believe that God will provide a way for them to choose God or not choose God, depending on what their choice is.
And what was the guy's name again that we're talking about?
Alexander Campbell. I know we're
And
back on back
he
on
was
track.
outside of both these camps.
Yeah. So the thing that placed him outside of those camps, remember how I said one had to bring themselves to a point of understanding?
Yeah.
So in both traditional, both of those two traditional forms of thought, God was the one who was bringing people to that point.
Right.
God was the one who was bringing people to the point of understanding. And it
Holy
was through the
Spirit.
Holy Spirit that
Right.
people are able to accept God, regardless of if you believe that things are predetermined, or that man is able to say yes to salvation or no to salvation. Either way, you believe that it's the Holy Spirit moving that allows people to understand salvation. Um,
And so the point of his thing was you have to basically do the work of the Holy Spirit and bring yourself to humility,
yeah,
to
to humility and to openness to God. Basically, you bring yourself
okay,
there.
right.
Um,
So you got to do God's job instead of the Holy
yeah.
Spirit.
So yes, and that puts him into the camp of what's called synergism, which that's a big fancy term that means it's your works as well. It's your work as well as God's work. It's not
Okay.
just God providing everything in salvation. It's you have to lead yourself in some way. Now, that doesn't necessarily, I wouldn't say that makes it works based,
Mhm.
but I do think that makes it synergistic,
Mhm.
which that actually brought him to a problem with the creeds that were used at the time. So there were
Mhm.
there were a couple of different creeds that he subscribed to most of, but not all of. I believe he was pretty similar to, I believe it was the 1689 Baptist Confession. He probably would have been similar to the London Baptist Confession, and then also to the incredibly famous. You've probably heard of this, the Westminster, right, confession, which is a pretty famous one in like Reformed circles, Calvinists. He
Uh-huh.
couldn't bring himself to reconcile with either of those creeds at the time,
Oh.
um which
To be honest,
really,
I don't
yeah.
really remember. I didn't really remember about those creeds.
Yeah, so there's, I mean, and we can get into a whole rabbit hole about creeds. There's a lot of creeds, and some churches are pro creed, some churches are against
Maybe
creeds.
we could just link them down below, and so you can read. They can read them on their own
I
time.
mean, yeah, you could. I guess you can do that after this if you want to find
Yeah.
the Westminster Confession and the 1689 London Baptist one specifically. Those are, obviously the most famous creed of all time would be the Nicene Creed, right? The
Right. Right.
things that the things that every Christian believes that unite us in being under Christ.
Yeah, I
Um,
know.
it's a really good creed, obviously.
Yeah.
But so if you can dig in a lot on this guy. There's some really interesting things about him. So 1800s, right? He had opinions on slavery. Okay. Um, he was an abolitionist. Okay,
Okay.
but His reason for being an abolitionist is not one that anyone these days should agree with. Some people probably do, but not any people that I like to associate with.
Uh,
Um, he believed that it was a detriment to the white race to have Africans on the American continent, which,
okay.
yeah, not exactly something that I would agree with, and it's sort of something that's a bit of a smudge on the people who are part of the denomination that he founded. That they claim that they aren't a denomination, though, and that sort of gets into the non-denominationalism.
He's a little off the rails. He's a character.
A bit, yeah. So he would spread a lot of these ideas. He was a Baptist at the time initially, and he wrote.
But he changed, right?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
safe. We're safe. Don't worry.
Like you ain't playing no more, dog. Get out of here.
So he used to write for a newsletter that was called the Christian Baptist Newsletter, and that was where he wrote his article about abolitionism and how we should get rid of slavery, so that we don't have other races in America, because he wanted a white America. And that was also where he wrote about his ideas of what we now know as restorationism. Uh, Kirk, do you want to define that term, or do you want me to?
I would, since you're already on the thought, I think you should do that.
So restorationism is really it's the belief that, generally speaking, within a couple of generations, all of Christianity just fell away, basically, right? And
Hmm.
there were no Christians until we restored the true faith. Like, no one had the true faith and had everything right until we restored it, which, that's not
AKA
exactly.
Joseph Smith also said
Yeah,
that too.
exactly. Joseph Smith, around the same time period, was saying the same things about his golden tablets and how he was restoring the true faith. There are a lot of people restoring the true faith in the 1800s. It's crazy. It's either one of them had to be right or all of them had to be wrong. I tend to agree with the latter personally, but it was basically, he said that the church apostatized and it never went back to the way that Christ went to be, and his one thing that he really, really hit on was we shouldn't have denominations.
Hmm.
So he said they're fully man-made constructs. God doesn't want this. This is providing, you know, disunity in the church. This is creating division where there doesn't need to be division. You know, and to a point, I get it, right? And I mean, I think we can all understand that to a point. I
Yeah, we don't
think,
need to argue all the time.
yeah, we don't need to argue all the time. I've seen way too many church splits in my day. I've seen way too
Yeah.
many, people abusing their power in churches. All that stuff, right? There's the negative stuff that happens all the time, and it would be great if we could all just come together and agree on everything. But we
There's
kind of.
differences for a reason, though.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, there's a couple of really good reasons to keep denominations around, in my opinion. The biggest one being, like, it's shorthand, man. Right? Like, it just
Mhm.
tells us, hey, that church says Baptist, so I know that church believes in believers' baptism,
Mhm.
and that church believes in salvation by grace through faith alone. Right?
Right.
Now, I don't know if it's an Arminian or Calvinist church. I don't know if they do contemporary music or non-contemporary music. I don't know, how the people dress there or any of that stuff, right? Just off of that name. I don't know if they believe in head coverings or something like that, right? So,
Yeah.
but it gives me a general idea, right? If I'm walking down the road and I see a church that says St. John's Catholic Church, I know what they believe,
It's
at
pretty.
least
It's
in
just common
general.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I walk past, the doorway of First Presbyterian and Second Presbyterian, who are, 2 streets away from each other. Once again, with that church split thing, right? Um,
Yeah.
walk past them. Okay, I know that they're Presbyterian, therefore they're going to be Calvinist more than likely. In fact, I would say near 100% of the time, unless it's a church that's flying under the radar and not, ascribing or subscribing to those creeds that they follow. Um, but it's good shorthand, right? So it would be
So
nice to have
he.
unity. right?
Yeah. So he didn't believe in Baptist and a Calvinistic creed, the Westminster Creed,
So he
and
didn't
then
subscribe.
sorry,
No,
so he didn't believe in the creeds. So then he went to Restorationism like Joseph Smith, and then because he said, "Oh, let's just kumbaya, let's all work together."
yeah.
But we all believe different things. So yeah, so is that am I kind of getting it?
Yeah. So like that's one of the issues with it. And so when you come into, especially back then, with the landscape that existed back then, um, these non-denominational churches, which really started to take hold for a bit back then. One of them even became what's called one of the mainline churches. If you've ever watched, let's say, a video by Redeemed Zoomer, who I'm sure you've heard of.
Yeah, I've heard of
Um,
him.
yeah, he doesn't like Baptists that much, but it's okay.
No,
I'll
yeah,
forgive him. So it,
nobody does.
yeah,
Who cares?
but anyway, yeah. Like anyway, I lost my train of thought there, but
So You're
yeah, so
saying you're saying we were talking about the line, how he got to where he
yeah,
got to,
yeah. So
and he
you
was
have
driving
you have
from.
mainline. You had one that even became a mainline church of these non-denominational churches. So you see them all the time, and they became denominations unto themselves. And why something like
Mhm.
that happens is when your entire thing is that one, denominations are bad, and two, that we need to restore the original faith. Well, anyone who follows that specific viewpoint is going to have to identify themselves, right, as
Yeah.
having the same viewpoints. So you ended up with churches of Christ, churches of God, Christian churches, and disciples of Christ. So
Wow.
yeah, all four of those groups. Now, to be clear, uh, Pentecostal Church of God is different than Churches of God.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And then
yeah.
there's also Church of God in Christ, which is also a completely different thing. So the Churches of
Yeah.
Christ, Churches of God, Christian churches, are disciples of Christ. Have you ever been driving down the
Churches
road
of
and
God everywhere.
yeah, you'll
Huh?
see the Churches of God. If you're driving down the road, sometimes you'll see the one with the picture of the red cup with a cross inside of it, and it just says Christian Church on it. That's one
Hmm.
of those. That's one of those four.
And all this came from that guy. His name. I see.
So it came from that guy, Alexander Campbell, and Barton W.
Alexander
Stone
Campbell.
is another person who was part of the movement and really started a lot of the stuff. I wasn't able to find near as much information on him. It seems that Alexander Campbell was really the driving force.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, so it's interesting though, because each and every one of these non-denominational churches, so to speak, uh, they all insist that they're not part of a denomination. Each of them is effectively its own denomination now, and they don't really cross over between each other as much. They do share a lot of the same beliefs, but they had some irreconcilable ones between each other, and so they stopped identifying with each other. So even though I mean, it's
And
like
they
they've
started more
created
denominations.
yeah, it's like they've created their own denominations, and they're like, no, these aren't denominations. It's like, okay, yeah, just like the Independent Baptist Church down the street that just so happens to only associate with other Independent Baptist churches that associate with this big Independent
Yeah.
Baptist church over here, or this one over here, not to
Or a
name any
certain Bible
names.
college.
Yeah, or a certain Bible college that's in the Midwest, not to name any names.
Or
But or a certain newspaper
Southern
that's in the
California.
South, or yeah, or a certain one in California, right? We aren't part of a conference. It's like, okay, you aren't part of a conference, just like the church, disciples of Christ aren't a denomination. You're part of
Right.
you're only independent in name only at that point, right?
So
Just like they're
that's
they're non-denominational in name only.
that's actually hilarious because I've seen those churches and I thought, oh, it's a this denomination, but no, we're so churches of God, churches of Christ,
Yeah.
Christian.
Yep.
They're all basically from the same guy, denomination from the
Yeah,
1800s.
yeah, it's all stems from that same movement. The general name for that is the Stone-Campbellites, right? Named
Stone
after
Campbellites.
named after Barton W. Stone and Alexander Campbell. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so that's not where this story ends, though, obviously, because
Right.
those churches are their own thing now. They're their own denomination. So really what we have to look at then is what was the driving force. So let's think
Mhm.
about this. That really, I don't think that that could have happened anywhere but America.
Yeah.
You got to think about how we think of things here, right? We think of things in a very different way than a lot of other countries do, where we're like, okay, we're American, we've got to be completely independent. We can't be, dependent to anything else,
Yeah, we
right?
can't work together.
We're very much so. Let's go out on our own. Let's do what we want. Like that's kind of how we are. Very
That's actually why I'm
individualistic.
starting. That's why I wanted to start this podcast.
Yeah,
We
and
go on our own and start our own thing. If so we can tell people what God wants us to tell them, because
and that's
if
not
we don't do it,
necessarily a
we're not
bad
gonna get the
thing.
opportunity.
But I think it's a very unique thing to America, that level of individualism. I mean, it's the same reason why, like, you in America, we don't really have the whole extended family unit. If you go to a lot of other countries, what do you see? You don't see one nuclear family unit. You don't see, one dad, one mom, and their kids. You see, all right, so great grandma, grandma, mom, the kid, and their kids are all living in the same house, right?
Hmm.
Because a lot of other cultures are very collectivistic. If you look in the history of the church, a lot of those churches were very collectivistic too. You had a lot of churches that were if you look at the beginnings of the church, everyone supported everyone together,
Yeah,
at all
your family,
times.
family,
Yeah, it
family.
was like a family. Everyone was like a family. And in the U.S., it's sad, but we don't really have anything like that. And I think that that's part of what led to that movement, right? Is
Yeah.
if
It
if you
was.
think, oh goodness, I just made the stream double there because I was pulling it up on my side here. But anyway, so you know it's very unique, right? And so that's what led to that structure, I think. But obviously, this isn't where the story ends. Like I said, someone else had to do the exact same thing at some point, right? So
Mhm.
turn to the 20th century. Okay, you ever heard of Calvary Chapel?
Yes. A
Okay,
lot of things to say about them nowadays too, where they give you some
yeah.
money. Have
So
you looked
so
into that?
I have not, no. Uh,
That's probably for another stream. Seriously.
okay, yeah. So if you need me to do another deep dive, I guess. But
I could help you with that one because I deep dive
okay,
into it. But they're
okay. If
getting
you've got
funding
some
from some
research
people.
already,
They got
yeah,
some funding from interesting places. You can look it up on Reddit, or
yeah,
a lot of people made a few people made videos on it. But anyways,
yeah. I mean, I guess that makes
another
sense that they
time.
were able to make their own movie a couple years ago. You remember that?
Oh yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I didn't. I mean, it looked
Well,
like it was.
I didn't watch it. I saw the
Yeah.
ads
I
everywhere.
saw the
You know what I'm saying?
trailers and everything. I don't know how accurate
That's
it
what I
was
meant.
or wasn't. I have a feeling it was probably way more charitable to Lonnie Frisbee than it should have been, but we
Right.
can get into Lonnie Frisbee in a minute if you want to.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, tell us the history of Calvary Chapel.
yeah, so basically, Calvary Chapel was started by Chuck Smith and Lonnie Frisbee.
He's
Uh,
a legend in Southern California. Everybody,
Chuck Smith? Oh, yeah, I would
everybody
imagine.
older than 20, everybody older than me. That's like their hero, national hero, which is
Yeah. So I
a
mean,
legendary figure.
and this was like, I believe it was like the 60s, so you had Chuck Smith, who encountered this man Lonnie Frisbee, who was this very 60s hippie, charismatic young sort of man, right? uh and Chuck Smith really wanted to start something to reach out to people like that, right? And I don't
Hmm.
think I don't think it's wrong to want to reach out to people who are,
Anybody, yeah.
yeah, anybody, but very 60s hippie sort of guy, um and Chuck Smith at the time was a Foursquare church pastor, which Foursquare is like a charismatic Pentecostal denomination.
Mm. Okay.
um but he was dissatisfied there with the ways that certain things were run. So what he decided that he was going to do is he actually took on a pastorate at a church that was unaffiliated, non-denominational. So they didn't have any sort of affiliation, right?
This is Chuck Smith.
This is Chuck Smith, yeah.
So he was Pentecostal.
Yeah,
What'd
Foursquare
you say?
specifically.
Foursquare Pentecostal, unsatisfied. Now he's going non-denominational.
Yeah. So he started that, he started preaching at that church, and he's like, all right, let's evangelize the youth. Young people don't want to talk, don't want to learn about Jesus anymore because it's all just a bunch of, you know, stiff people wearing ties that don't know how to talk to him and don't care to talk to him and tell him how to dress and tell him that they need to cut their hair and all that stuff, right? And so basically he would he and Lonnie Frisbee started the Jesus movement, or the Jesus Freaks movement, right?
Hmm.
Which I'm sure that you remember a certain pastor talking about the Jesus Freaks movement when we were in
Yeah.
college, and talking about how it was just another world of compromise, and in a way, yeah, definitely.
Well,
Um,
just hold your thought real quick, but if you've ever looked into how the hippie movement was started, um, it's actually really insane.
I haven't.
Well, a
That's
lot of it, well, and that's for us. A lot of it is about basically it was uh it was like a government psyop basically. So people were it was like an anti-war like the basically people were anti-war, and so they a lot of people believe this, but they wanted to discredit them, so they started basically like putting drugs into the youth and the people that were against going to war, and I don't know how to explain it, but it
hmm.
was like a government. A lot of people believe it was like a government
Wouldn't
controlled
have been the first
movement.
time the government
Yeah,
gave people LSD. I mean, I think we both know
yeah,
about
exactly. It was
MK
by
Ultra,
like they
but
used like Grateful Dead, like the guy Jerry Garcia. Like a lot of people say he was an FBI informant, and the FBI gave him LSD.
that's
That's like a
interesting.
lot of people say that.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever heard that. It's an interesting
But I
rabbit
mean,
hole.
is it 100% true? Who knows? But that's what people say. Who knows?
It's what
People can
TikTok
look
told
into it.
you. No, just um,
Yeah, I also do a lot of videos about that, but yeah, it's just it's very shady. It's not very straightforward.
yeah. So that being said, yeah. So
Right.
so I
Sorry,
mean,
I went a random one.
back to what we were talking about. So you had the Jesus Freak movement. Basically, what they were doing is they were going around the country trying to evangelize hippies, youths that were like, maybe disadvantaged youths, maybe youths that just other people didn't want in their churches, and they were spreading stories about different miracles, like Book of Acts style miracles, right? Like healings,
Oh wow,
faith healings, all that stuff,
wow.
right? That's what they claimed in their movement, which
Sounds very charismatic and Pentecostal.
yeah, it's almost as if he just split off of the church that he went to so that he could do the same thing, but with alongside someone who had long hair and dressed like a hippie, which is basically what he did.
It
Not
sounds like a
not
rebranding.
Yeah, I mean, not to
Very
disparage
American.
Lonnie Frisbee for how he dressed. I definitely have other things to disparage Lonnie Frisbee about. Um, so a little bit of a tangent, a little bit of off topic. So okay, this past year, I think it was. You remember when it came out that Michael Tate of the Newsboys was secretly like, actually secretly gay and like assaulting people.
Michael Tate.
Yeah.
Honestly,
So
wait, I'm not too
yeah,
familiar with them.
the Newsboys, the "God's Not Dead" song people. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
oh yeah, I know that movie. Yeah,
yeah. So the people singing the song at the end of the movie. Yeah. So Michael Tate came out that he was doing all this stuff. What's funny to me, okay, and this is only funny to me because it's ironic. Okay, Michael Tate, that stuff came out about him. Um, Michael Tate wrote a song called Jesus Freak, or sang it in a song called Jesus Freak
yeah.
with a band called DC Talk, right? What's funny is Jesus Freaks, the movement that the song was named after. One of the people leading it, Lonnie Frisbee, was caught doing things very similar to what Michael Tate was caught doing, and was actually secretly living a life as a partying, promiscuous gay man, the entire time that he was helping run the Calvary Chapel churches.
Lonnie Frisbee
So
was doing that.
Yeah, Lonnie Frisbee. Yeah, so that's what I was implying when I said I had things to disparage Lonnie Frisbee about. Um,
That's insane.
yeah, so it's very interesting that like this and you know, I'm not saying that look, I'm not going to say that it was caused by, you know, compromise or anything like that. I don't think compromise is the thing that causes sexual immorality. I wish it was, because that would make it so much easier to tell when a church was going to have those issues than it is currently. But you know, I mean, which we could go into a whole tangent there.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah.
If you ever want to go into that rabbit hole, just watch missionary Spencer Smith on YouTube. He has plenty of very good videos covering those topics about abuse in churches. Very very good guy. He's a friend of my dad and of one of my former pastors. So um, missionary Spencer Smith, very 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 good
Shout out.
guy. Shout out to him. So yeah. Anyway, so the aim of the movement, you know, Calvary Chapel, was to bring in, you know, those
Young hippies.
yeah, the young hippies, those who are young and maybe unwanted by a lot of the other churches, into church, right? Which is a noble cause.
Yeah, that's
Um,
good.
their methods I don't necessarily agree with. You know, obviously I'm not a charismatic. If anything, I would argue that I'm mostly a cessationist. I do believe miracles can still happen, especially through prayer.
Right.
However, I don't believe in faith healing or anything like that, right? I don't believe that if I, you know, put oil on my hand and hit you upside the head, that you can walk again, right? Um,
Yeah.
but maybe, you know, through prayer, I believe God can do anything that He wants to
Oh
do.
yeah. I personally been healed through prayer.
Yeah,
When I had, you were there actually. When I had a tumor on my leg,
yeah,
I prayed for it and to not be cancerous, for it to be healed, and the surgery went away easily. The exact next year in college, I had another huge infection on my liver, and I got really sick for my junior year, like for like at least 2 weeks, and I was in the hospital for a week straight. And I prayed again because I was get my your liver enzymes are supposed to be like 8, 9, like less. I think like less than like 14, and they said that they have like 14 is really high. And I had like 800,
yeah,
so they said it was really bad. Like I could, I don't know. They didn't even say. They said it's gonna be not good. They didn't even give me any options. So and then the Lord healed me. So I definitely have seen prayer heal people. But yeah, like those. TV preacher. I think that even Steve Martin has that movie where he like has a guy in a
yeah.
wheelchair and he like gets up or something like yeah, that kind of stuff is of course for theatrics. Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, and prosperity gospel that a lot of those people peddle is just it's sickening, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, okay. So you're telling me I'll have perfect mental health as long as I follow God? Okay. Let me just go back in time and tell you know, C.H. Spurgeon that, who struggled with
Yeah, he was
depression his
really
entire life.
distressed.
Yeah, I'm sure that C.H. Spurgeon just wasn't in his Bible enough, right? Um
Yeah.
like I don't get where people get this from, you know, and some people who don't even claim to be prosperity people will get into that same sort of thing, right? Of, oh,
Right.
if you're depressed, it's because you're not spiritual enough. If you're anxious, it's because you're not spiritual enough. It's like, oh, or it could be, you know, I don't know, that there's spiritual forces in the world that target people, right? You know,
Yeah.
that's a thing. It's in the Bible. It's
People
biblical to
are
believe
afraid to
that.
admit that demons are real. They're afraid
Yeah,
to admit that they're real.
yeah. So I mean, you know, but back on topic, right? I mean, the aim was
Yeah.
admirable, right? I think we can both
Yeah.
agree
Yeah.
it's admirable to try to get those young people into church, those unchurched people in. But you know, they kind of had to get rid of a lot of what made a church, right?
Hmm.
Um, I
Like
don't,
what?
you know, like it led to a lot of the very modern, you know, all right, let's get smoke and lasers on the stage sort of things, right? Because you're
Hmm.
doing things to attract the youth in, you know. So you're doing things that are flashy, that are showy, and I think that kind of, in my opinion at least, it takes away from the reverence that you should have when you're in church, right?
Yeah.
I believe when you step into a church, it should feel different than when you're on the street. I know
Yeah.
it's just, you know, I know it's a building, right? I know any building can be used for anything, but like I think there's importance in making sure that a church is a church, right?
You're definitely right about
I
that.
think it should bring into your mind the fear of God that we should all have, which that's another issue. Is I feel like a lot of that movement sort of led to the a lot of the songs that we have now. Some people would refer to them as Jesus is my boyfriend songs. Uh,
Yeah,
and it's led to those. It's led to
devil worship and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. Some of these songs that just, some of them are theologically accurate, and kudos to the people who are, and I say this as an independent Baptist. Maybe I'm not supposed to say this, but kudos to the people who are writing theologically accurate contemporary music.
Yeah,
But there, for every one of those, there's five that's not, right?
yeah.
For every, casting crowns that's out there, there's, you know, let's say five Bethel Musics or five Hillsong churches, right?
Yeah,
Which that's a whole different Hillsong is practice. Never mind. I'm not going to get into that rabbit hole. I'm sure
that's another one.
that's another one. That's another one. But
So these guys, Chuck Smith, Lonnie, they're trying to attract the youth. They're bringing the lights and the lasers in. So so how do we get to today?
yeah, so I mean, it really set a precedent, right? I feel like when Calvary Chapel was able to be successful doing what it did, you leave your denomination and you create another church that believes basically the same thing, but doesn't have any of the standards, doesn't have a lot of the reverence, doesn't have a lot of what else is out there. And it's very easy
Mm,
to start a church not as far as actually starting it, but
starting.
as far as starting your own brand of church is just as easy as starting any other church, right?
So
Especially these days.
you break off, have the same Christian beliefs about God. You have the same beliefs
hmm
about God. And then you just say like, hey, let's not really emphasize. I don't know. I know Pentecostal churches like they don't even wear rings and
Yeah,
they have
yeah,
like
they take the whole modesty thing and they're like, "Oh, modest doesn't just mean covering everything. Modest also means I can't wear earrings, I can't wear rings, I can't wear necklaces, I can't wear anything in my hair. I must have my hair never put up. It must always be down and it must never be cut." Right? I
yeah.
did the crazy eyes to go along with
So
it.
basically,
But
you just take those. You basically have only beliefs about God, and then your beliefs about everything else, how you live, you kind of
yeah,
basically just say,
you kick it to the
not too
side.
important.
Yeah, yeah, and I understand the whole let's not major on the minors thing. I get it. I get it. We want to try to stay unified in Christ. We want to give grace to our brothers and sisters in
Have
Christ,
love for
but
people. Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
and have a love for people and but at the same time you can't throw away everything, right? There,
Right.
the old hymns of the faith I think are very important. They're very important to me. We can go over that in our Christian poetry episode that I'm sure we will one day do. You
Let's do
you
it
know
next
me
time.
with yeah we could do that one next time. Just a sneak peek into some of the stuff I could talk about. I believe I've written well over 300 poems at this point.
Wow.
Uh, Poetry is incredibly important to me, and I think
Baptist
that's
Tupac.
yeah, yeah. Except
I'm just kidding.
considerably less famous and less vulgar. So there's that. Um, I think he's got me beat on flow though. I'll give him that. But I'm not involved in any gang violence, so the chances of me getting shot are a
Oh,
lot a
what?
lot lower.
You?
Yeah, and I'm not like one of our friends who would potentially go into a city like Oakland and flash gang signs just for fun to see what would happen.
No,
I
character.
I think he's grown up by now.
Yeah.
It's funny actually. I think he's related to the to one of the other guests. Um, but anyway, so
Oh,
and then
sorry. So, le- so about these churches. So for example, is every church okay? So you explained Calvary Chapel, but like, what about those churches? Like, what I'm confused about is like, where do these churches with like I had no idea the Church of Christ was a
yeah.
non-denominational. I had
Mhm.
no idea Calvary Chapel was not. I had no idea they were non-denominational. I mean, I thought they because they all have there's a bunch with the same
Yeah.
name. But what about those ones that say like the Leaf or
Yeah.
the Apple Church
So what
or
you
like
end
what? So how do those
yeah.
churches? Like, what I'm if you don't know this and you're listening, when you start a church, and just like you start anything, you have to have money and a support system. So a lot of pastors, a few back in the day, like my dad, he just went out with barely. I don't think he had any support. A guy gave him a little bit, a little tiny. No, I don't know about a little bit. A smaller sum to help him start, and then you live basically a lot of people in the Baptist movement. They lived in poverty for like 30 years, 20 years, and then God does a miraculous work and grows it. But a lot of people, a lot of people when they start a church, a lot. The people I just described as a few, they have somebody they go to church and ask for donations and support to get to get a building or to get even chairs. So I see these churches and I'm like, this guy has you know whatever name the table church, and it's like, hey, how do you have a giant building in one day? Like, how do you have a giant, how do you just, where do these churches just pop
Yeah.
up out
So
of?
so to explain that, there's a couple
Is that
things.
connected at all?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a couple of things. I mean, you have these churches. Some of them are actually started when, let's say, a Calvary Chapel church, or let's say even a Baptist church starts, and then they actually they'll get a second building, they'll outgrow their first building, and then a lot of the time they'll change their name, they'll change their identity completely. Sometimes they'll still be connected to whatever convention they were connected to before, like the SBC, for example.
Yeah.
The most
Okay.
famous non-denominational church in the U.S. right now, and has been for well, I mean, it's only been non-denominational technically for I think 3 years. Would probably be Rick Warren's Saddleback Church in California.
I was just about to say that, probably with Rick Warren, right?
Yeah, yeah. Rick Warren was affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention until 2023. A lot of churches actually follow, practically follow Rick Warren. A lot of these non-denominational churches. Some of them are actually not non-denominational that you think might be non-denominational. If you go onto their website, it's like, actually, this is a church that's part of the Evangelical Free Churches of America. I went to a church like that in Utah when I was growing up. That was Evangelical Free Churches of America, which is part of the Pietist movement, which is that's a whole other can of worms. Once again, we don't need to get into that, but it's basically a grandchild of Lutheranism, except they took a lot of Baptist doctrine because they used Baptist hermeneutics. So, more of literal, grammatical, historical, which is a very common dispensationalist Baptist hermeneutic. Although I know dispensationalism is a dirty word, especially right now. Um, but it
Yeah.
means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. People hear dispensationalism and they think of something completely different than what you or I believe 99% of the time. But anyway, you have a lot of that same philosophy though of the Calvary Chapel Church, right? A lot of them will be churches of a different denomination, and then they'll become non-denominational. They'll come out on
Mm,
their own, right? You actually do have some other non-denominational denominations. Cowboy churches would be one of them. That is a thing. That's not like a
yeah.
made-up thing. That it's literally called cowboy churches. And a lot of the goal is growth, right? And so a lot of these places will abandon the things that mark them as what their doctrine is. They'll abandon the Baptist label. They'll abandon the label of Pentecostalism. A lot of them are either Baptist, Pentecostal, or charismatic. A lot of these churches
Mm,
in theology, um, and they'll abandon that label so that way they don't alienate anyone. But in doing so, they remove what identifies them, and so you end up with people going to churches that they don't wouldn't necessarily agree with potentially because of that. Um, but a lot of the time why they've removed themselves from being associated is the other churches wouldn't necessarily agree with how they run things, how they do things, right? Southern Baptist Convention wouldn't be okay with the way that a lot of non-denominational churches are ran, and I can guarantee you almost no independent fundamental Baptists would be okay with it either, right? So
yeah.
so they sort of just become completely independent from anything else other than maybe the church that sent them, because you do have church plants, right, with these non-denominational churches. City Hills
Yeah.
Church in Knoxville, I believe, was a church plant. Faith Fellowship, and you'll have them plant other churches. Generally, starting out, they'll be under the same name. Then they'll split them off, and they'll call them sister churches. I've been to churches that have done that before, right? Um, where they run these church plants. But oh no, we're not a denomination. We just fellowship with 500 churches across the world. It's like, yeah, that's a denomination.
Yeah.
So I hate to break it to you,
What,
you are
you
in
want
a
to call it
denomination.
franchise or something? Like what?
Yeah,
No.
yeah. Like, I mean, it's like, that would be like, if a McDonald's was saying, well, we are the same brand as every other McDonald's, but this isn't a McDonald's. It's like you serve the same stuff. You came from the same place. You associate. You all talk to the same people. You are the same thing. Even if you decide to if a McDonald's decided to call itself Mickey D's instead of McDonald's, specifically put Mickey D's on its sign, it's still a McDonald's. It doesn't matter that it's calling itself not a McDonald's. It's a McDonald's.
We're gonna get
right?
heartburn afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. You're still going to get the same heartburn. It's still the same poor quality ingredients. It just calls itself something different. So, one last thing, though, is a lot of these churches are a little, are in decline, actually. I mean, non-denominationalism as a whole is actually on the uptrend. But I think that's just because a lot of churches are throwing away their denominations more than that there's a lot more non-denominational people out there. But a lot of churches are in decline these days. But primarily, it's actually not the ones that a lot of people would think, right? When you think of a church that's in decline, a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's probably, those churches that are really conservative, and the churches that, like, tell people how to dress and tell people what to sing and what not to sing, all that stuff. It's actually not those churches that are dying out, believe it or not. The churches that are more dying out are actually the theologically liberal ones. I mentioned the main lines earlier.
Yeah.
Those are all dying. They're all dying churches, and I think the reason why they're dying is they've taken what made their church different and distinct, right? Because denominations, going back to this point, denominations are important because it tells you what they believe.
Yeah.
So you take these churches that oftentimes, especially think of the PCUSA, they've become a shadow of their former selves in doctrine, and they just allow almost anything to happen now. They've taken away their hard stances on hot button political issues. They don't make a stance on anything anymore, and they just tell everyone that they can come in and do whatever they want, practically believe whatever they want. Oh, you don't want to believe that's part of the Bible? You don't have to. Oh, let's just throw away the letters of Paul because we don't like Romans 1:25 through 27. Which, I mean, I'm saying it that way to not have YouTube flag us. But, I mean, because that's a specific passage, and I'm sure you know exactly what's in Romans 1:25 through 27. But a lot of these mainline churches have gone, who cares? I don't care that that's in the Bible. That it wasn't Jesus who said it. Okay, but the Bible is inspired, not just the words of Jesus, right? Those who have taken a stance are either declining at slower rates or aren't declining at all. The Southern Baptist Convention is actually declining at a much slower rate than the American Baptist Convention, which is almost dead completely at this stage.
And American Baptists, they come from the Northern Baptist Convention.
Yeah. So originally they were called the Northern Baptists. When the split happened in the 1800s. Back to the 1800s. Woo. But
Dude,
yeah,
I got something crazy on that. Do you want to know who? Well, that's for a different time. But if you look into who funded the Northern Baptist Convention and then who funded liberal theology, it was actually a Rockefeller. He funded a guy that did that. And I know it comes from different places, right? But it's in the book. We actually got it at Golden State.
So John D. Rockefeller, I know himself, was actually a Northern Baptist. He was actually very devout in comparison to his children and his children's children and now his children's children's children.
But he funded one of the biggest liberal theologians.
Really?
I don't want to say it misspeak, but it was, I think and then that guy went on to start Riverside Church in like New York City. I think it might have been. Was it? I don't want to say no. It was a seminary in New Jersey. It wasn't called. It wasn't Princeton. It was like Union,
Okay.
Union. But anyways, that's dude. That would actually be
It's
a
for
really
another
good
time.
trip.
Yeah.
We gotta do
So
this. We gotta do another one of these, bro. This is so much
yeah,
fun.
yeah. And you know, like I said, some of these non-denominational churches, if you look theologically, are going to be actually really close to a lot of Baptist beliefs. And some
Hmm.
of them are actually really really, you know, I would say doctrinally speaking, very doctrinally sound.
Hmm.
But the issue is when you don't put up your fences, right, anything gets in. Right? So
Mhm.
you have a lot of issues there. Um I mean, think of the lack of checks and balances that we have as IFB. Now, imagine that there wasn't the pressure of the fact that anyone else who was IFB was keeping their eyes on you effectively, which, you know, there isn't enough pressure there, I think. But like these non-denominational churches have no structure, no set structure whatsoever,
No
and
oversight,
so
no structure. Hmm.
yeah, so I mean, I think I don't think non-denominationalism, in the form that it exists currently, is long for the world. Personally, because you have a lot of these churches that don't have, you know, that they follow the Stone-Campbellite mantra of, uh, I believe it's no creed but the Bible is the
Right.
mantra, which is funny because in and of itself that is actually a creed.
Hmm.
If you think about it, that is a creed. Saying no creed but the Bible is a creed. But you know, they don't have any guidelines. They don't have any theological tradition backing them. People will act like Baptists don't have theological tradition, and I'll be honest. A lot of Baptists don't know our theological tradition. We have no idea where we like half of us don't know anything about where we came from. We don't know anything about like, you know, the farthest back a lot of people go is, well, I mean, there was the Danbury Baptists who
Yeah.
put separation of church and
Connecticut.
state in that one letter, and there were the Baptists in Rhode Island. Was that the same group? That's not even the same group of Baptists. But a lot of people will
Roger
say, "Is that
Clinton.
the same group of Baptists?" You know, no. Um, so like, you know, I think the answer to I think our answer, we should have an answer to anything that's around us, right? And I think our answer to the non-denominational church is honestly not to cave in, not to give in to non-denominationalism. I know it's
Hmm.
growing right now because it's flashy, right? It brings people in, but honestly, a lot of the people that it's bringing in are not, you know, I hate to say it, not the people that we want. Um, because it's not
Well,
people who are truly seeking God. It's people who are seeking a community only. And that's not what
well,
church is for.
and I do Bible clubs all over. Oh my gosh. I think I just ended the stream.
No,
Did I end the stream?
no, I don't think maybe.
I
Let
just
me hit the
accidentally
live
clicked.
button.
I just
No,
accidentally clicked.
no, I'm still streaming.
I just clicked out
Um,
of Google.
that's fine. You weren't the one running the stream. I'm the one who on my side is running the stream. So now there's this little tacked on part here at the end about thinking that we're running the stream. But basically, back to what I was saying. My answer to that is we don't need to give up our label of Baptist. I
Yeah.
think we need to stand as Baptists and continue to be Baptists and learn what it means to be Baptist. Need to learn why we're Baptist. That's a big thing that I don't think is taught enough, even in Bible college. I don't think we learned enough about why we're Baptist. Um, like a lot, you know, what truly makes us different, what truly makes us distinct. I think we need to continue that. We need to continue on with our rich history of tradition and theology, and I think that we need to continue to, you know, to believe what we believe and strengthen our own beliefs rather than giving up what makes us unique. Because I think that's what's going to cause us to go the way of the main lines. Because when they
Hmm.
gave up what made them distinct and different, that was that was what led to their downfall. So that's really all I have for today. Personally, I know
But
we're at an hour.
I was gonna
Um,
say, I would add on to that. It's like a lot of a lot of the people that the fruit of their church, they have no idea, even like basic ideas of Christianity. Christianity, like
yeah,
you ask them, how do you become a Christian? Um, like I was teaching in Bible clubs, and I had to teach on, this was the Christian club, not non-Christians. This is, I'm already a Christian, and I taught about sin, and people would look at me like, what? And I'd be like, sin. So then I realized I had to teach a lesson on sin because they were taught basically, and then they didn't tell me this. I picked it up empathetically, that they are taught sin is being mean to someone. Sin is not being a nice person, right? You could see it because I smile a lot and happy, and then I did a whole lesson on sin. That sin is, all these certain things that God tells you not to do, or
Yeah.
tells you to do it and you don't do it. So it's they're not really teaching a lot of fruit. And like you said, for Baptists, we need to know why we're different. And it's
Yeah.
like, just like for them, if you're Pentecostal, you need to know why you're Pentecostal, so you can, you're different for a reason. If we're all, it's like, if we're all doing the same trend at school,
Yeah.
you know, we're not cool. We're all doing the same thing. We're actually corporate. And I
Yeah.
was saying,
Yeah.
that's what a lot of churches feel like. It feels like a corporate. All the it's like, it feels like an Amazon church, and it's like, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. I didn't like corporate. I worked
It's
I worked with these big corporations, and I don't like them, and I don't want to go to a church that's corporate.
yeah, it's really important to keep what's distinct, right? Or here's the thing, right? Is if you don't know, let's say one of our listeners here is somebody who is currently, let's say, going to a PCUSA church, right? They have no idea what it means to be Presbyterian. Let's say
Mhm.
they decide to study it out. Maybe they don't agree with what they're currently doing, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and I mean, then you're not Presbyterian. If you don't agree with Presbyterian doctrine, you're not a Presbyterian. If you don't agree with Baptist doctrine, you're not a Baptist. But a lot of
Yeah.
people don't know what they actually are, what they actually believe, because they've never studied it. And it's incredibly important to study it, because a lot of what happens, I mean, we had many friends that this happened to. They didn't know why they believed what they believed. And what happened to our friends that didn't know why they believed what they believed?
It went off the
They
rails.
they went off the rails. They either left the church in its entirety and decided that they would despise Christ, or they decided that they were going to no longer be Baptist and, okay, well, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, because they studied into that, or they studied into certain parts of church history. They didn't study. They didn't. It's funny because they always study. Whenever someone studies church history, they don't study from now and then back to so that they can see the whole timeline. No one ever does
They
that
study
for
the,
whatever reason.
they study the front right here.
Yeah, yeah, they're like, oh, well, okay, let's look at church history. Let's just look at the first 200 years of church history.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, and that is important to study, it's important to learn, but also it's important to learn, okay, now why did the Protestant Reformation happen? Why are there Baptists specifically? What happened there?
And
Right?
super, a lot of corruption.
Yeah,
Insane.
there was a ton of corruption in the Catholic Church, a lot of the
Still,
doctrine, a lot of the doctrine that's found in the Catholic Church is not stuff that's found in the Bible, and they're like, well, it doesn't have to be. It's like, yeah, well, it does actually. If God wants us to do something, if God commands us to do something, he would have written it here. That's kind of what the Bible is for. It's for us to know God. Um,
yeah.
I mean, there's so much that can be gleaned, I think, even without the Bible, through what's called natural revelation, right? Seeing nature around you reveals that there
Right.
must be a creator, but there's only so much that can do for you, right? Going outside and looking at the trees doesn't tell you God cannot lie.
Right.
Going outside and enjoying the sound of a river doesn't tell you Jesus died for you, right?
Yeah.
There's so much in the Bible that people need to learn, right? And I do believe that it's important to know church history, but I think if you're going to study it all the way out, right? Don't stop part way and go, okay, well, I guess I'm Catholic now, which is what some people do. I guess I'm Orthodox now. Oh, well, there were this group called the Gnostics. What did they believe? Go down that rabbit hole. Guess I'm Gnostic now, which you see that sometimes. I saw someone earlier who was like, I came up with something revolutionary. What if the God of the Old Testament was an evil God and then Jesus is a good God? And it's like, okay, first off, that's heresy. Second, that's not revolutionary. That's very early Gnosticism that was like argued against in the 3rd century. That's not That's
Yeah,
not new
valid.
at all.
Well,
As Solomon says, there's nothing new under the sun, right?
yeah,
Every mode of thought, there's no such thing as an original thought, especially not now, not in the age of the internet. Um, but anyway, so I think that goes over everything we needed to go over today.
awesome,
Um,
dude. That was
you know,
awesome.
I know we kind of went off on 7 million different rabbit trails, but hey, that's just what you do sometimes, right? So,
We
um,
stayed pretty straight on. I mean, we got to the subjects and then we rehashed it so you could figure it out. But I think you need to come back. I know you want to do your one poem episode. I think we need to do an episode on Baptist. Like if you, I know, I mean, you could both. This one you primarily you studied yourself deep on. I think we need to make a comeback and go, hey, how did Baptist start? Where did we come from? And the problem for me that rises up with studying Baptist, it's like the first like 12 chapters are always just like rereading to you Acts, and it's like I understand Acts. I read it myself, probably I don't know where I'm at in my Bible schedule
yeah,
right now I'm in Proverbs, but I'm like I know Acts. It's
yeah,
like how do we? I read a Baptist book one time, and it's like Acts 4. It's like or whatever. It's like that.
yeah,
Okay, we're
yeah,
not
and
in
then sometimes they'll
Jerusalem
go,
right now. We're
and then the apostles were martyred. It's like, yeah, I know that. That's like very common knowledge at this. Now, to be fair, for some people, people who just got saved off the street, that's actually probably very useful because not
That's
everyone
true.
does know Acts, right? I mean, you got to think.
Yeah.
There's a quote from a very classic novel, uh, that basically says you shouldn't judge what people know or don't know because not everyone had the same privileges and upbringing as you did, right? I mean, and I think we
Shame.
both need to keep that in mind because part of why I know a lot about so many different denominations, and we could have gotten into this at the beginning, and we probably should have. I didn't grow up Baptist, as you know, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important context for anyone who's viewing this as a VOD. Um, that I didn't grow up Baptist, right? I grew up, my family was Assembly of God Pentecostal when I was a small child. We went to a non-denominational community church for a bit. We went to Evangelical Free Church. We went to another Evangelical Free Church. We went to a few different denominations before I went to a Baptist church when I was a teenager. And I was saved before I went to a Baptist church. I was baptized before I went to a Baptist church. And
Hmm.
there we go. Just lost you any viewers that you had that were Baptist Briders right then and there. Uh, but
I get it.
unless it's our good friend JJ who love you JJ. Still not gonna get rebaptized. Anyway, so uh, it was growing up that way and learning alongside my parents really, I think, taught me to study things out and learn things for myself. And that is a privilege I will not
Yeah, me too.
ignore, right? You have to recognize the privilege of being someone who was raised and trained to study, so that you could, know things and not just hear them from others, which is sadly what, especially with AI these days, what people do.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You
That's one of
know,
my pet peeves. My parents trained me the same way, like to figure things out for yourself. So I will go like I read books. Yeah, I'm a pastor. We read, and then I'll study anything I'm interested online. I'll study it, and then I had someone tell me you didn't study this out, and I was like, all the points you're bringing up are points that are like those are like day one points. I trust me, I covered. You are just you didn't even hear what I said. You're just responding to chat, not ChatGPT, but AI programmed responses from Facebook, marketplace.
yeah,
Your responses are like, yeah, I know I can probably tell you the real where you got that from. Or you're sending me the Facebook meme that you got that from. I'm like, you you were told this. I learned this. It's like don't.
yeah.
This is a
I
pet
mean,
peeve. Like please stop repeating stuff to me that
yeah.
you were told. Yeah, I could tell you the page you got it from. Thank you.
Yep,
It's like
that's a pretty pervasive issue on the internet. I've run into that quite often. I mean, good thing with people that respond with memes though is they generally run out of memes before I run out of words to say. So, But
Yeah.
if they're using ChatGPT, you know, it's hard to win an argument against something that'll, if it runs out of things, could just make it up.
Yeah.
What's your source? I made it up. It was revealed to me in a dream. You know, that's a source of what Ellen G. White, you know, the Seventh Day Adventist person. It
Yeah.
was revealed to me in a dream. But anyway, so
Yeah.
yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on here.
Oh yeah, no
It
problem,
was a
bro.
good
Anytime.
time, a good talk. So, um, I'm looking forward to you getting your second hate comment here. You know, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Can't wait for
I
some non-denominational person to get really angry for some reason. You
dude.
know?
Well, you know what? I think we need to put in the first 5 seconds that uh, somebody that worked with the founder of Calvary Chapel had a what was that guy again?
Oh yeah, yeah. Lonnie, with his partying and
He was in the closet.
lasciviousness, and he was in the closet. Yeah. Yeah.
That is
Lonnie Woods.
that is
Yeah.
that's great information. See,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's why I had to
The
bring George on. 'Cause he goes,
yeah
you
the
go,
original
bro.
the original one of the founders of the Jesus Freak movement, and then the guy who wrote, you know, or who sung the song Jesus Freak, you know, Michael Tate, did the same things. I still think that that's really ironic, but all right. um,
Yeah,
yeah, this was
you want to
a
end it
good
on
time.
your end?
Yeah, yeah. Let's
Thanks,
get
bro.
this done. It was a good talk, and I look forward to being on here again.
Oh yeah, anytime, big dog.